Hey guys, welcome back to the Unleashed podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Rieger, and today we're chatting with my very good friend, Scott Brown. Scott is the development director of Globe International. They are a large mission sending organization that have been around for 50 years. Scott plays a very crucial role in that organization, and the Lord has just connected us together. He's one of those guys that when you meet them, like, man, there's an instant connection with this gentleman. He found me through my book, Streams of Income. And guys, I'll tell you, if that was the only thing that came out of the book, just my connection with Scott, that would have been worth all the time, the energy, and effort of writing that book, getting that launched, and doing everything around it. Because he found that book online somewhere, reached out to me on Facebook, and told me about what he does and how he has a heart for ministries to help them create income outside of just donations. So that immediately got me fired up. So we had a conversation and have become very good friends since that time. So, Scott, thank you. Thank you for being a strong mentor in my life. Thank you for your friendship. Thank you for what you do. And so, guys, I am just honored to share my friend with you. He's just an amazing guy who loves the Lord and has a heart for people, has a heart to help people dream again. I think you will fall in love with who he is and just his gifts. We talked about so many things. One was about ministry in the marketplace and how we, as non-professional, in quotes, non-professional Christians, non-professional ministers, we're not the ones up on stage at church every Sunday. We're not the ones that, at least me, Scott's in very much in the missions world, although he's not like overseas somewhere. It just feels like we have this view, or it seems like there's been this view that we're just not quite as valuable in the kingdom as somebody who's up on stage every Sunday preaching, or somebody that's serving in Africa. And guys, I cannot tell you that I cannot tell you, even I can't be more emphatic about this, that is such a lie. That the people that are up on stage, the quote professional Christians, they are the ones that are supposed to equip us, the body, to go out and do works of ministry. Now, that does not mean that you're going to be out on the street corner. You're not going to be, some people do, some people preach that way, but it probably does not mean that you're going to go to work and you're going to have a megaphone and you're going to be standing, you know, uh, in your office and you're going to be preaching to your fellow employees, your coworkers. That will probably get you fired. So don't do that. It just might mean you're just building relationships with people. You're just doing life together, and they see that, man, there's something different about her. There's something different about him, and they're drawn to that. And Lord has you right where you are for a specific purpose to reach certain people, to do certain things for him. And so be encouraged that your ministry in the marketplace, whether you're in business, whether you have a regular job, whether you're a stay-at-home mom, is so crazy valuable. We need it in the body of Christ. So embrace the season that you're in. So Scott and I talked about that, but he just he's a great storyteller. And he talked about a couple of stories that I think will just grab your heart. And he loves helping people to dream again, to see how valuable they are. He's an encourager by nature. And so I think you're going to love this interview. And also just wanted to invite you. Scott's going to be a part of our Unleashed group. And so go to everybelieverunleashed.com. Check it out. We're just getting started. Still plenty of time to jump in. We'd love to help you unleash the call of God on your life. Here is my interview with Scott. All right, Scott, welcome to Unleashed.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. This is an
Of
exciting
course.
thing.
My honor, and thank you for being willing to do this. And we'll get into the whole reason why I wanted to have you on here in a minute. But even in my past life of Streams of Income, which was, I guess, just season one of this show, I wanted to hear people's stories because they're so powerful and there's so much that you can draw from it, so many lessons that my audience and me can learn from. So let's talk about you. Who are you? How you got to what you're doing now? You can go back as far as you want. You can go back to the hills of Ohio.
That's a neat subject right now.
Yeah.
Rural life, I think, is
Uh-huh.
becoming more evident in our nation again, regardless of what your political stance is, with JD Vance coming into the picture as the
Right.
the potential VP running mate of former President Donald Trump. He's
Right.
bringing to light the values and the essences and the things that you and I learned coming up
Totally.
in rural areas of the country. You in Indiana,
Yeah.
and I in
He's
Ohio.
from
There's
Middletown? Is that
He's
right?
from Middletown, Ohio.
That's a
Yeah,
suburb
just
of
down the road from
Cincinnati,
where I was
correct?
raised. Just above Cincinnati, just south
Yeah.
of where I grew up
Yeah.
in what they call the Miami Valley of Ohio.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. Awesome. Well, we won't talk about how many years ago that was. It wasn't too long ago, but
15, 20, maybe
15 to
something like that.
20, yeah. But how'd you go from being a Miami, Ohio region kid to now being development director of Globe?
Well, I don't know that I ever stopped being a Miami Valley region a kid.
Right? It's still in.
Yeah, absolutely. Growing up in the Midwest, was if I had to go back and God allowed me to write my life out, I think I would still choose that location.
Mm,
Growing up in Southwest Ohio in the late '60s and the early '70s, it was in some senses a Norman Rockwell kind of life.
yeah.
I grew up primarily on a 279-acre farm, back a quarter of a mile lane, growing up in a house that when I lived in it was 155 years old, with
Oh,
these barns and outbuildings that were even older. And both my grandparents lived on farms, and my community around me was completely and totally agrarian.
mm,
And then, town life as it was, whether it be our county seat or the town that I grew up outside of, we're total small town America.
mhm.
Main streets with little shops and restaurants, and
Yes.
the local, town square with the courthouse, and where
Yes.
everybody came together for, community. That was a perfect life.
Yeah.
And I don't think that some of the values and the experiences that I gained through that lifestyle have ever left me. And so everything that
Mhm.
I do today is, I always tell people, from an agrarian mindset. I
Yeah.
understand the word of God in the way that it was written as a farming manual.
Yeah. Ooh.
You plant, you
Hmm.
nurture,
Yeah.
you harvest, you replant. And
Mm.
that's the way that I handle, everything that I do, whether it's business or ministry or life or parenting or even marriage, is from that standpoint of understanding that there is a preparation,
Yeah.
there's a progression, and there's a response to that can be repeated over and over if it's done right.
Mm. That's so good. I mean, that's what you do. I mean, as development director, you're out there raising money. You can't usually go right to, you probably don't do this, meet somebody and say, hey, here, I need a check from you. Your relationship building, you're getting to know them. So you're planting a seed. And it takes time, right, to nurture that
Mhm.
relationship before you maybe a long time before you even make the ask.
Well,
Wow.
relationship and actually what you're doing with this podcast are so intertwined, because we as humans and human nature and the way that we're created, we are in essence storytellers. Whether we're the storyteller or the story listener, we all progress that way. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the reason we love books, it's the reason we love movies, it's the reason we love podcasts.
Yeah.
We're reality junkies, and we want to hear that story, whether we know that it's fiction or true, because that's our mechanism. And so when we do things in life, like what I do now in development for a missions organization and raising funds for the organization or for individual missionaries, it's about relationship. It's
Mhm.
about the story. It's about relaying the narrative of what is happening through that missionary, through that ministry, what the needs are, how a partner or a donor can become involved in that. That's all part of the narrative. And then how you work that together for the common goal, the common good of the people that you're ministering
Yes.
to. And it's all about relationship. It's all about the narrative. That's the way the
Yeah.
Bible's written. That's the way humanity's written.
That's so good. Wow. How did you, what were your steps going up to Globe? I know you've been with Globe, you've said ever, in some ways, all the way down when you were 13 years old, you've been involved with Globe. And
That
Globe's
was
been
my
around
first
since
introduction to.
1973. Is that right? Or
Well,
two?
Globe started it in earnest in 1973, although their
Okay.
first missionary went out in 1969,
Wow.
before they were, incorporated as an organization.
Uh-huh.
My first dealings with Globe International, this mission sending agency, which is now over 50 years old, was an introduction to the church that at that time it was attached to, as well as a Bible college. And my father was a student at that Bible college, and so I was introduced to Globe. And so many of the missionaries that came through that college or a part of that church are on the field with Globe today. And so I've known them
Oh,
for a good while. But as far as how I got involved with Globe, how I got involved in ministry, Ryan, for you and your listeners, I'm not going to give the best answer for those that are seeking ministry. I fell backwards into it.
yeah.
When I was a young man in college and even out of college, as newly married, even with my first child, if you had asked me, what do you want to do in life?
Hmm.
While I was raised in the church and loved the Lord and loved His Word and loved missions. I grew up in a missions minded church in Southwest Ohio. But being a quote unquote official minister of the gospel or an ordained minister or working for a ministry would have probably been way down on my list.
Mm,
I might have suggested other things like taxi cab driver or
right.
bartender or something before going into ministry.
Yeah.
Because the reality was at that time in my life, I really didn't understand what that meant.
Mm,
And so many of us have a mindset on what ministry looks like, from possibly a pastor that is in front of them on a regular rotation on Sunday morning, or they might know a missionary who has dedicated their life and they left for deepest darkest Africa 30 years ago. We've never heard from them again and we don't know what's going on. Or
yeah.
possibly an evangelist who's doing a crusade, and that might be someone you saw on TV. I remember growing up like you did in the Midwest, and watching Billy Graham. He was so fascinating with me, but
Yes.
never once crossing my mind that was something that I would be involved in. That was
Yeah.
other people did that. God
Right.
had other people doing that.
Right.
And whether we feel we're not worthy of
Mhm.
taking those positions, or that we don't know enough about it, I think sometimes life and the enemy of our life blinds us to the fact that each one of us, regardless of where we are on the earth, and regardless of what it is that God has us doing on a daily basis, we're all called to ministry. That
Mm,
might be ministry to our family, it might be ministry
yeah.
to our neighbors, our community. But we're all called
Yeah.
to minister and proclaim the fullness of His gospel. And it wasn't until later in life that I really realized that all meant all, that every
Yeah.
one of us meant every one of us. It just happened that God wanted to officialize that a little bit more in my life than He would
Mm,
say, the grocer down the street, or the man that runs the car mechanic shop, close to us. They're still ministers,
yeah.
but He
Yes.
officialized mine a little bit differently.
That's so good. Wow. Do you feel like it's there's a change? Like I feel like there's God's calling people more into marketplace ministry and actually um the old paradigm is I sit in church, I'm a business guy, the pastor's the professional. I just come here on Sunday and I go out and do a secular job. And that's just not quite as holy as what my pastor does every Sunday, or not quite as holy as what your missionaries do on a day-to-day basis,
Mhm.
day-to-day basis. But I feel like that's starting to turn from people I talk to. There's just more and more coming out about that, like what you just said, you are a minister right where you are, and God has you in that auto mechanic role for a reason, and it's
Mhm.
nowhere less important in the kingdom as your pastor on a Sunday morning. Can you speak to that? Because you're talking to missionaries all the time, but you're also an encourager. And I know there's people who don't feel called to go to Africa, but gosh, I want to serve the Lord just like that person that's in Africa, but I don't feel called to do that. How can I, as just a business guy or just an employee at this boring company,
Mhm.
serve the Lord?
Well, think about it. I think, and we often say that there's a new paradigm when people coming into the knowledge that, there are ministries within the marketplace. I don't know so much else that it's actually new. I think we're coming back into the realism of what it is. If we read the word verbatim, which we should, and we read the stories of those that followed Christ throughout the New Covenant, the New Testament, these are all business people.
Yeah.
That he called. These are each one of them, whether they were tax collectors or fishermen, or other, these were business people. And the Lord Jesus Christ called them to follow him, and they traveled together, but the word never says that they stopped their businesses.
Right.
If you look at James and John and Peter as fishermen, when they found that they were not able to be next to Jesus anymore, they went back to their nets, the Bible says. Well, that means that they either had their business still going on through employees, or they had enough of a circle of family or friends that were still fishing, they could jump back into it. Yeah. So, he never asks us to remove the skills that he's put into us as business owners.
Yes.
I know that there would be some more astute than I who might argue what I'm about to say about Paul, but the reality is that Paul was a Pharisee. That was a business. That was a religious business. And of course, he persecuted Christians. So in some senses, we think about it, for the Pharisees, he was a police officer.
Yeah.
He was a security official.
Good point. Yeah.
And he was persecuting and killing Christians, not because he was a mean guy, but that was what he had been tasked to do. He was doing what he thought was right in his own eyes. He wasn't doing it to be malicious. So, when he was introduced through the presence of Jesus Christ, through a visitation, his life changed.
Yeah.
But as we continue to read about Paul's life, about his and other business people around him, Paul continued to have income through tent making. Yeah. He was vested in doctors and dyers of purple and other businesses throughout, his travels. They interacted through the business community. Yes. We hear about Jesus, the disciples, Paul, and others engaging in places like the temple and the synagogue. But the lion's share of their interaction was within the business community, was in the marketplace. Yes. So that in and of itself, for me, sets up a foundation for where the gospel should be first presented. It's not in the walls of the church.
Right.
Hopefully, for the most part, everybody that's inside those four walls already knows Jesus. Yes, people come in, yes, give their lives to Christ and become part of the church, but for the most part. So where are those that mostly need to hear the voice of Jesus through you? They're in your office.
Yes.
They're in your store. Yeah. They're on your podcast.
Yeah.
They're your neighbors down the street that you interact with. They're people that you patronize for services. That's marketplace ministry.
That's so good. Wow. More people should be getting saved outside the church walls than in, shouldn't they?
Amen. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, because you're in church, you're pretty much very high up in a mission sending organization. Are you seeing stats like globally, like where? I mean, we didn't even plan to go here, but just a question. If you don't know the answer, you just tell me I don't know the answer, or where I can look it up. Like, how are we doing on a global scale of reaching people for the Lord? I mean, I hear snippets here and there, and then there's the 1040 window. Like, do you have any kind of up to date things that you heard? Like, what's the state of we get a state of the gospel right now?
Yeah, I'm not a stats guy. This is another podcast, but you know my love for the game of baseball, and whenever I'm interviewed because of my writings in history in the world of baseball, I always tell interviewers I'm not a stats guy. If you want to talk stories, if you want to talk experiences, if you want to talk biographies, that I can do. I'm not a stats guy. Yeah. So I can say that actually within this situation as well. I'm not a stats guy in the world of missions, but I can tell you the same from stories and from experiences and what we're seeing within Globe and the circles that we travel in, that we're seeing in just in our little portion of expanding the gospel, that we're seeing more and more ministry started from a position of working in the marketplace.
Ooh,
Now,
wow.
that might be from an educational standpoint, that might be from a humanitarian standpoint, that might be from an actual business started. We have a missionary, Ryan, that you're familiar with, and we won't talk about them because they're in a sensitive area of the planet, but went into this area, became part of the community through a business model
Yeah.
that really was focused on the tourist industry in their area and thrived in that for years, all while discipling and leading leadership growth in church leaders around the area, and then found an opportunity to open a small business literally across the street from their home. And now they've, you've watched this, they've opened a small business. They're serving the community, which is predominantly unbelievers in another belief system.
Yeah.
They are giving jobs to locals. They
Yeah.
are loving on families, and they're seeing family, relation, and community change, all because they decided to invest themselves in the
Yes.
business of that community. And again, this is someone so you've watched that growth.
Yeah. Can we talk about the type of business it is without saying the country?
I think so. I think we can.
It's a fascinating story. It's like the cookie recipe that is so famous that people love.
So this is a family that, while they have background in other industries and businesses, both of them together, husband and wife, like to bake and cook. And so in their area of the world, they could not get the flavor of baked goods and things they want. So they started making them. Then friends started loving them. Then people started asking for requests of baking. They turned it into a small cottage industry, and they've outgrown 3 different kitchens in their growth
and they're like
process.
wholesaling it, right? Like
Wholesaling it.
If I'm a coffee shop guy in another part of the city, I can order wholesale their cookies and sell it to my customers.
Cookies, cakes, all kinds of confections. So they're still doing the wholesale, but they needed a bigger kitchen, and they thought, well, why not open our own cafe?
Wow.
So they've done that and opened a bakery and a coffee shop. And I mean, just again, ministering to the local community, the locals, even though, these missionaries are not part of their their nationality, have just adopted them in because they're loving on people. And what a position to be able to share your faith.
Absolutely. Yeah, I haven't talked to them in a long time, so I'd be curious to have an update. So it's open now and everything?
It's open. Yeah, they're
That's
open and
awesome.
functioning.
Wow, and it's a coffee shop, right, as well?
Coffee shop and
That's
bakery.
amazing.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Big industrial ovens, the whole 9 yards.
I mean, if they decided to, I don't know if they could do this, but let's say that they had taken that space and they turned it into a church. Well, people aren't going to walk in there, but a coffee shop, I'll go grab a cup of coffee, and it's just business opens doors that normal church just can't. It puts you in places that you never could go as a quote professional minister.
It's true. I now live, as you know, outside of Orlando, Florida, and the little community that I'm in. Before we moved here 4 years ago, we had friends in the area, so we would come down and visit and love the area, and would just spend time in Winter Garden, Florida, which is a wonderful little community in itself. Lots of shops and boutiques and things on their road, and they draw a lot of tourists from this area. And I remember years ago there was a gentleman that I was aware of who's a local pastor, and he decided to open a coffee shop. And this coffee shop is called Oxum, which is a Kenyan word. I forget what the actual meaning of it is, but they were getting a lot of their coffees from Africa and around. And his concept was that he decided for the first number of years he would not make a profit. Well, sometimes that's decided for you in new business,
right.
But he was going to give any profit money to missions. And so he built on that concept. Now, I knew of this man, but I'd never met him. A couple of years after it was open, I was sitting there in this coffee shop with another pastor friend of mine. And where we were seated, I was watching this man behind me People would come and sit down with him for a few minutes, have a cup of coffee or two, and then leave. And somebody else came, and same thing happened a couple times, which says that my friend and I were sitting there for quite some time. But I said something to him, and he turned around and goes, "Oh, that's the owner. That's Pastor so and so. He does
Mhm.
all of his counseling here in the coffee shop."
Wow.
Because it's not only his parishioners that come to him, it's predominantly those in the community that probably wouldn't go to the church, but they'll sit here in the coffee shop and he's able to minister to them
Yes.
in that environment where they're comfortable, they're at peace, they got a great cup of coffee, and it's just friendly. And so he's to
Mhm.
this day, they've been open for, probably almost 15 years.
Wow.
And to this day, he still gives to missions through their company. He still blesses the community by putting dollars back into the town. He gives
Mhm.
people jobs, and it's a place of ministry where he ministers to
Mhm.
beyond the walls of his church.
That's so good. Wow.
Great concept.
That is a great concept. I almost think like if I felt called to start a church, why don't you start a business first and just hold your church in that business after hours? Because it gives you
Again,
so much
it's
more.
biblical.
Like people aren't gonna. If I started a church, Scott, across my street right here, and there's going to be building new houses. But let's just say I was in a town area where coffee shop would be okay or a church would be okay. Nobody's just gonna. Maybe people would wander in that needed help or needed food or whatever, but people aren't just going to walk in and just hang out, but they'll walk into a coffee shop, and that's just
Mhm.
a more inviting atmosphere, and you're going to be able to get way more ministry done in that type of atmosphere to people that need it than by having a church.
Absolutely.
It's
Again,
amazing.
just kind of just touching on my other life in baseball, teams and leagues that I'm involved in across the U.S. that either the team itself or fans or even players know me. I have been involved in more ministry in baseball stadiums, I think, over the years than I
Wow.
have others. People know me as a pastor. I've
Yeah.
prayed for healing for people in the stands, while baseball games going on. I've ministered to broken marriages. I've
Yes.
prayed with people for new jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, sometimes it's those areas, those arenas that are outside the box,
Mm-hmm.
and really they're not outside the box, they're
Right.
outside the church box,
Yes.
where we get more accomplished. A dear friend of mine, some of your more mature listeners and viewers like myself will know this name, but a dear friend of mine, Bernie Carbo, who was a Major League Baseball player, he really hit rock bottom in his life, found Jesus, and now has an incredible ministry back into the world of baseball. He and I collaborate on things, throughout the years, and both of us have talked about how much more we're able to do in the comfortableness of the environment of the people that we desire to minister to. If you want to minister, if you want to minister to bankers,
Mm-hmm.
where are you going to find them? If you want to minister to politicians, where are you going to find them? If you want to minister to farmers, where are you going to find them? Don't wait for them to come to you.
Yes.
We minister to baseball players and fans through our ministry.
Mm.
Um, where are you going to find them? I, I'm not looking for them to walk through the doors of a church that I'm involved in. I'm
Right.
going to walk through the doors of where they are. That's their
Yes.
stadium. That's their clubhouses. That's their ball fields. That's
Mm-hmm.
where you go. That's what
Mm-hmm.
Jesus did. That's what Paul did. It's the best way.
So good. And it's right in line with your interests. You love baseball anyway, so it's not like you're suffering sitting there. You're enjoying a baseball game and a ministry opportunity arises. And you're right. It's like what you said earlier. It's right in line with, your passions, your skills, the things that your talents. You said you don't have to remove our skills for
No.
ministry. He's going
Well,
to
the
use
Lord,
those skills to put you in places that you couldn't go otherwise, or maybe that I
absolutely.
wouldn't go or couldn't go.
Hmm.
Maybe I hate baseball. I don't, but if I didn't like baseball, I'm probably not going to go to a baseball game, and therefore I'm not going to have that opportunity. But he's wired me for something else, so I'm going to
That's
go
right.
there, and that's where my ministry is, and it's in line with my interests.
The song tell us, God gives us the desires of our hearts.
Yeah.
we need to look at that two ways. You know, God says we have not because we ask not. So he's giving us the ability to ask upon the desires of our hearts within reason, of course. You know, I mean, there is some context there, but
Mhm.
also we need to remember that God gives us the desires in his heart. He
Yes.
makes his way easy for us. His yoke is light. So if we just ask him, Lord, I have these things that you've put into me. I like to bake cookies.
Yeah.
I like to plant flowers.
Hmm.
I like to scrapbook. I
Hmm.
like to help people learn to read. Whatever those things are that God has put in you can be used as a ministry. Each of us is
Yes.
called to proclaim the gospel
Mm.
in the mission that the Lord has called us to.
So good.
If you are a stay-at-home mom or dad, and you are home with the kids all the time, taking them to baseball games, soccer games, helping them with their homework, whether they're homeschooled or not homeschooled, you still have opportunity to intermingle with their friends
Hmm.
and with their parents and with the other activities that they're involved in. That's a mission post. I
Yes.
remember years ago, our children were small, and we built a new house, and so we built it from ground up. I didn't build it myself, but
Right.
we were there in that process, and we decided to include the children in an activity.
Mhm.
So when the sticks, as they say, were up, when the frame was up,
Mhm.
we went over one evening and prayed over our house that was being built and wrote scriptures on the pillars of the home and on the slab and all that, and prayed over it and consecrated it. And one of the things that we prayed was, Lord, we ask that in this new subdivision that's being built, this new neighborhood, we were one of the first homes. We said, even if we don't proclaim always with our mouth, allow us to demonstrate your light and let us be a beacon of love and hope to all those in the community.
Mhm.
Well, the first instance of that was, as I said, my kids were small, and as houses were being built with other children, that were part of those families, our house, for whatever reason, became the place where they would all come and play. They all would come and
Awesome.
play.
Yeah.
They would come and play on the swing set. They would play in the woods in the back. My kids always had other kids in the house. My
Mhm.
wife was always giving out popsicles and lemonade and water, all that. That was the kind of house
Right.
it was. And for this one instance, there had been a large group of children, and a young boy from about two streets over, who'd become friends with my kids, had been in the house with all the other children. And they all, after a while, piled back outside of the backyard to do something. And this young man, whose name was Aaron, was still in the house. And he was kind of just wandering around aimlessly in the living room. And
Mhm.
so my wife said to him, she said, Aaron, do you need something? Is there something I can get for you? He goes, no, I don't need anything. And she said, are you feeling okay? And he said, yes, I'm feeling fine. She said, well, you can stay inside as long as you want the air conditioner, but everybody else has gone back outside. She goes, is everything okay? He goes, yes. He said, I just wanted to stay inside because it just feels good. And these were the words of a young boy. He
Mhm.
said, it feels peaceful here.
Wow. 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 As I assume as opposed to his house.
Don't know, but he
Yeah.
felt that
Wow.
peace. And
Yes.
so my wife told him, she
Good.
said, sweetheart, you can stay as long as you like. And we saw that repeated over and over time. So even though my wife was a stay-at-home mom at that time, was raising our children, teaching our children, she became a minister to so many other
Yes.
kids
That's so
and
good.
their moms and dads throughout, and that was her mission post.
Wow. 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 That's amazing. And it's changed now because she's doing something different. Your kids are older, but so it's not the same type of ministry, but
Yeah,
your house is still that way, I'm sure.
that was
I
the
mean, I've been in
season.
your house. It's peaceful and you have people, you're hospitable, and now it's people staying over and spending the night and going to Disney.
Yes, it is.
Oh my gosh. Well, I want to get to that's amazing. I want to get to the reason that prompted me to ask you to get on anyway with me is the story of
Hmm.
the lady who wanted to be in ministry of helps and kept saying hearing no from one someone I put it in an email to my list recently because it just blessed me so much, but
Mm.
you will be able to tell it better. So if you could just explain that story to my audience.
Well, I'll give a little background context so it'll make more sense. But I think one of the things that I'll tell your audience is that, you know, as Ryan was talking about, you know, seasons change, just as it did with my wife, and she's doing something different now as our kids are older. You know, that's one of the things you can expect from God. Not only does he give you desires of your heart, he changes with you in season. And that's a beautiful thing to take care of. If the Lord puts you in a ministry that you're in for 30, 40 years, and that's what you've done, and I know some ministries that have, that's fantastic. If he changes you every couple of years into something new that is more profound than the next, that's incredible as well. And so, you know, we've been taken through seasons, and in this particular season of my life for the past number of years, one of the things God has given me to do as a more senior minister is allow people to understand their ability to dream and expect in God. And
Mm,
sometimes that's just sometimes we just need those
mm,
allowances. But for me, that goes back to my early days on the farm in Southwest Ohio. One of my favorite things to do as I prowled around, you know, that almost 300-acre farm, you know, in and out of barns and with the livestock and, you know, playing with my brother and family members and things like that. One of my favorite things to do was I would take my dogs and I would go out into one of the back clover fields, and just as you know, you were raised, Ryan, in Indiana. You know,
mm,
there's rolling hills, but there's a lot of flat space too. And so, you know, we have big sky country. The sky just seems bigger in the Midwest sometimes. And so, one of my favorite things to do is go to and lie on my back with my dogs in the clover field and just watch the clouds roll by. And the clouds became my dream farm, you know, because as the clouds form and you see shapes and pictures, it allows you to dream and create stories and just kind of see what they'll form into next. You know, as a cloud is formed and you might see a turtle or a frog or a train or whatever it is that formulation is, it won't be very long until it forms into something else. And I think that that is one of the experiences that we need to remember in God, that he allows us to dream,
mm, mhm,
and he has not only put that dream into us, he helps that dream now shift and move into the picture of what it's supposed to be.
mm,
Because God is ever increasing and ever developing. One of the other things I did in my life is I was in the jewelry business, fine jewelry business, for a number of years, and a cut stone, specifically like a diamond, always fascinated me because you would never see it the same way at any 2 points of your viewing because of light and some, you know, film from oils of your hands up on the diamond or the way that you turned it. Those facets would change light and pictures and imagery within inside of it that was never the same in two instances, like never the
mm.
same two snowflakes.
Wow.
And so, you know, God is like that. He is not a God of lack. He is not a God of just enough. He's a God of abundance, and he's ever changing. He doesn't change, but he allows us to change and move forward into greater and greater glory.
Mm,
And so learning that through watching clouds as a kid gave me a little bit of an advantage.
mhm.
I'll tell one more story before we get
Yeah, of
to the
course.
one that you want me to tell. Many years ago, a ministry that I was involved in Pensacola, Florida, had become engaged with an inner city elementary school. And this was an incredible school. The state had given a large sum of money to have this school built. And what they took was the three most underdeveloped inner city schools and combined them into one elementary school. And because it was state funded, state backed, they had the most prime everything. When you walked in, there was a house size globe in their atrium, and it was moving, and all the classroom hallways broke off into hallways that were dedicated to individual nations and countries. And so the children could go through these hallways and learn about Thailand or Mexico or Canada and Peru. It was amazing to watch these. Every classroom had an enormous smart screen that the children could interact with other schools around the country. Their windows were so that they dimmed and lightened according to the sunlight. They had nurseries on top of the roof to have grow places to have fresh vegetables and teach the children how to grow. Their music room, every child had their own instrument when they walked in, whether it be a keyboard or whatever. Their library was 2 stories high with a complete castle in the middle of it.
Wow.
But yet, because of family situation in this inner city area, most of the children in that class or that school had come into 2 and 3 grades behind in their learning experience as they should. 70%, that's a low figure, 70% of the children in that school had only one or no actual parent. They might be raised by a foster family or by other relatives like grandparents, uncles, and aunts.
Wow.
10% of the school were actually considered homeless because they were living in cars or
Wow.
somebody else's house, that wasn't theirs. Children came to school with no underwear, no shoes, and the school would provide them for them. They had the best of the best, but yet they were ministering to the least of these.
Yeah.
So the ministry I was involved in got engaged with this school. We helped with backpacks that went home with food. We provided shoes and clothing and bicycles for some children so they could ride to school, and just really, everyday needs for children that were in the desperatest of need. Yeah. I made up a word, desperatist. How you like that? Okay. And so I remember touring that school for the first time with the principal, who was a profound believer. And she's walking me through the school and showing me all these amazing things. And then I got to engage with some of the children who were, oh my gosh, just absolutely the most precious you'd ever come in contact with. They all wore school uniforms. They were all so well-mannered. These kids had come from the lowest of the low, but were being brought into just high excellence of life, not because of what people were giving them, but they were giving them opportunity.
Yes.
And that was a big word, opportunity.
Yeah.
So because of what our ministry was providing for them, and as I was touring through and just so impressed by these children stepping into their own because of opportunity, I remember turning to the principal and I said, what is the greatest lack that these children face? Of course, from my mentality, I was thinking, well, they need extra, food in their backpack to take home.
Right.
We need, we need computers or something. I'm thinking these tangible things as the adult head that I was, I was being. And I remember turning to the side. What is the biggest challenge? What's the biggest lack that these children have that we can speak into? And I mean, without batting an eye, the principal turned around to me and she said, they don't allow themselves to dream. It crushed me. Here these children will be given the best technology, the best learning experience, the best opportunity, the best resources they could possibly have. But they were still going back to a situation where they were often waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah.
Am I going to have to move my home this week again?
Yeah.
Is my parent going to leave me again? Am I going to have enough food to get through the weekend for me and my siblings? Those kind of questions that children should never have to answer.
No.
And so dreaming became the thing that was put on the back burner. Why dream about what could be when I don't even know what is?
Right.
And Ryan, it just absolutely crushed me. So even though encouraging people to dream where they are was always a part of me, my life, and my ministry, that day was a turning point for me in that I knew that I wanted to develop, whether it be resources, skills, or a firmer foundation of the Word of God, that whomever I came to minister to in the days ahead in my life, I wanted to provide them the ability and the knowledge to know how to dream in God.
Yes.
And sometimes that's just allowance, which
Mhm.
now takes us to the story of what you
So
wanted me to
good.
tell, but I'm going to stop there in case there's anything you
No,
want.
that's so good. I've heard you tell that before. It's amazing. Callan's 7 years old, and he dreams because that's what you do when you're a kid. But somehow
Amen.
we lose that. Like, I'm older now; it's not practical to do that anymore. I got these big responsibilities, but we need to be like kids again.
We do. And no matter how old we are. And so the story that you wanted me to tell was about a lady that I've recently come in contact with. My role within Globe International as a development director is more than just fundraising for the organization, more than just helping to fundraise for missionary projects or personal income. My role is creating resources and opportunities for our missionaries that have been with us for years or those coming in. And Globe, from its inception, has always been an organization that was there to facilitate the call of the individual missionary. Our original president, Bob Bishop, once said that Globe exists for those who have a God-given mission to achieve that mission or vision. I've heard him say it both ways. But, that means a lot when, you have someone that has a vision, has a mission, and does not know how to achieve that. Being able to come in and facilitate, resource, encourage, and
Yes.
allow them to do that makes all the difference.
Mhm.
And so recently, I came in contact with a woman who is in her mid 60s,
Mhm.
has been in the ministry of helps for many years, so much so that she will go to sit with individuals or missionaries who are in need. Maybe they need administrative services. Maybe they need someone to sit with them because they have a medical condition. Maybe they need someone to come in and take over for a little while they go on holiday or respite. But she's definitely in the ministry of helps and has a lot of deep skill sets to be able to do those things. I mean, that's a gift. The ministry of helps is a tremendous gift.
Mhm.
However, years ago, knowing that she wanted to officialize this and have the ability for people to be able to give financially into this ministry was something that she knew needed to happen as she had grown. She had mostly taken care of all the ministry expenses out of she and her husband's own pockets. And so she went to her own church, her own denomination, and this particular denomination has a missions component to it for, over 100 years. And so she went to her own denomination that she's been a part of for many, many years. And at that time, in her early 60s, applied to become an official missionary of this organization within the denomination. Filled out all the necessary paperwork, went through all the necessary interviews, was very excited about being a part of her own church's missions approach.
Mhm.
That application sat on the desk of some administrator somewhere for over 2 years without an answer.
Wow.
This woman, beautiful lady of the faith, continued to work in her ministry the same way that she always had, but awaited that answer from, her trusted friends to say, you know, how can we take this farther? How can we be more efficient?
Mhm.
After 2 years, she finally received an answer that said, your vision doesn't align with ours. And by the way, you're too old.
Gosh.
They immediately discounted her gift
Wow.
and they immediately discounted she herself because of her age.
Mhm.
We're never too old to serve the Lord,
That's right.
and no vision is too small to be effective in the kingdom.
Mm.
Fortunately for her, she was determined to continue, and she did for a couple more years. Um, Money out of their own bank account to serve the kingdom, and she did it with finesse. And so within the past several months, she became associated in with one of our staff members. And our staff member invited her to apply to Globe, which we give our staff members that ability. And so she did and started going through the process to find that she was getting affirmation.
Mm.
So when it came to her first conversation with me, I asked our application administrator, I haven't met this lady yet. Can you tell me a little bit about her? I said, what's the one thing that I need to discuss with her? And my administrator said, she said, I'm going to tell you, knowing you, your personality, and what you're going to talk about. She said, would you please encourage her to dream again? I said, boy, I can.
Wow, that's right up your alley.
So we gathered she and I gathered on Zoom, and I asked, to hear her story. I wanted to know all of her background, where she came from. And then she got into the story that I just told you. And so I just listened. And I looked at her through the camera after she was finished, and I said, I'm not going to tell you exactly this is thus saith the Lord, but I have enough of the God in me to say this is what God's saying to you. And I called her by name, and I said, up until now, and we're not going to point fingers at anyone or anything or any situation, up until now, you've been given no. And I said, the Lord says to you today, that was not my no. And I said, but today you're being given a yes. And the Lord wants you to know that's his yes. And he affirms who you are in him. She began to, get a little misty. That was not my goal, but she did at 60. Well, I won't give her age, but she's in her mid 60s.
Yeah.
So, is learning that she's being affirmed in her father almost for the first time. And so then I looked at her, called her by name again, and I said, I want you and I to do something together. I said, and I don't want this to be difficult. I want to not only affirm you, but I want to give you the allowance of doing something, and I want to do it with you. And she's kind of looking at me, not knowing me very well yet.
Yeah.
And I said, I want you to dream again. And everything that you can possibly dream about that God has put in you and going farther. I said, let's dream together and see what God wants to do with what he's given you. And Ryan, it was almost like tears just shot out of her eyes. And she said, nobody has ever told me that before.
Wow.
I was taken back to that situation with the young children in that school once again. Their greatest need was to be able to dream again, because someone or something had told them, and we know it's the enemy,
Yes,
that they weren't allowed to dream. Someone or something had told this precious woman of God, who was actively serving her Creator and helping others find him in whatever situation they were in, was told that she herself had been disqualified and was not allowed to dream.
Yeah. Wow.
This woman is going to go places upon this earth.
Yes.
This woman is going to make a difference in ministries across this planet. This woman is going to see souls come to Christ because someone told her that she was allowed to dream.
Yes. Oh, that's so good. Wow. Amazing. I can't say anything else besides that. That was awesome.
Well, I think
You
if
gave her
there's
hope.
something that I want to say to your audience is, regardless of what situation you are in, I mean, if any of you were to get Ryan or I aside today and ask us about the life struggles that we go through on a daily basis, they're the same as yours. We have, financial and family and, life situations. Goodness knows that our country, our nation is going through an upheaval right now with a lot of uncertainty and unknown. So there's things around us that we could all look at in a negative spin,
Yeah.
and shut down. But that's not what the Lord has built into each of you, regardless of situation, regardless of circumstance, regardless of how old you are, what gender you are, what marital situation. It doesn't matter where you are in life or what life has dealt you and what the enemy has meant for evil in your life.
Yeah.
You have the opportunity to dream in God once again.
That's right.
And if you're dreaming in and with God, there are no limitations.
That's right.
The top's just been taken off, and you can do anything. God himself said that you can do anything in and through him. So for each of you listening today, I want to tell you, if you're not dreaming, start.
Yes.
If you need some inspiration, Call Ryan and talk to him. Call me and talk to me. We want to inspire you to go farther. I can tell you that I have the privilege of being involved with Ryan Rieger on a lot of different fronts of life. And the one thing that we always enjoy doing together is dream.
Yes.
We constantly come up with ideas.
Yeah.
Mine are far diminished in all the ideas that Ryan comes
Oh, I
up
don't know
with.
about that.
Always help each other to
Yeah.
dream forward. And so
Mm.
I encourage you to do that for yourself and for others. Dream in the Lord.
Mm.
First we dream, then we believe,
Mm.
and then we succeed.
Mm.
That is the basis of hope, faith, and love.
Good. Amen. We will leave it there. Scott, thank you.
Thank you for having me. This has been
Appreciate
great.
it. We'll see you next time.